how confident are you about getting a deal at COP?
I think the right thing right now is to focus on the last days of this and really focus people's minds. We've made great progress. When we started our process as presidency of COP, something like a third of the global economy was covered by net zero commitments. It's now much, much higher than that, close to 90%. We've seen commitments this week and last week on coal, deforestation, methane. But ultimately, we've got to make sure you've got the combination of two particular elements. One, the commitments to cut emissions, the nationally determined contributions, but also the finance, the international climate finance. We've doubled our commitment to make sure that the poorest, most vulnerable countries are locked in and have got the wherewithal, the technology, the know-how to meet their obligations as well. OK.
I do want to talk about sleaze, of course, but before that, sure. Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe, her poor husband, is outside your old office. Yeah. He's been there for 17 days. I spoke to him yesterday. I mean, he's not a well man in that his brain is working slower. He's not eaten for 17 days. He needs his wife home. What are you doing?
Well, look, as you'll know, during my period as Foreign Secretary, first of all, I met with Richard a number of times. I also spoke to Nazanin because we secured her release on furlough. We have been doing everything we can to secure her release. I know, having spoken to Liz Truss, who's now Foreign Secretary, it's a top priority for her, and my heart goes out to that family. Ultimately, of course, it is the Iranian government, and they've got a new leadership, a new president, I think widely regarded as more hardline, but nonetheless, that's what we have to deal with, and it is incumbent on them to release all of the dual nationals, Nazanin included, who are arbitrarily detained, and reunite them with their loved ones.
Give them the money we owe them.
Well, look, in relation to the so-called IMS debt, that's a historic debt. We've always said that we will work to resolve that, and that's outstanding, and those negotiations continue. But I don't think there can be any excuse for arbitrarily detaining for the length of time in the manner, and this isn't an isolated case, there are other cases that we are working very hard on. And it's contrary to international law, and those Nazanin and those other detainees should be released. And it's not just the UK.
Do you acknowledge, though, that if the money is paid, that it's accepted that we do owe the Iranians, but dating back to the 1970s, then we will see the dual nationals and Brits being released?
It's not clear to me at all, and I don't think there should be a direct quid pro quo. We've made clear that we want to resolve that debt, but it's not been clear that the Iranian government is seriously committed to releasing all of our dual nationals. That's what needs to happen.
Would you ask him to end his hunger strike in the meantime?
Oh, look, I've met Richard and Nazanin. I've spoken to Nazanin. I've met all of our detainees. I just want him safe and well. Of course, I don't give him, try and tell him what to do in terms of the tactics, because he's the one in the position of being father and a husband to Nazanin, but I want to see him safe and well, so of course I'd like to see him. We've heard his message. We're doing everything we can. He knows me well. I'm happy to speak to him again, but of course he's speaking to Liz Truss as well. But what I would give him the assurance, which I hope would help, is that we're doing everything that we can. OK.
Deputy Prime Minister, the Speaker of the House implored you and your colleagues to sort out the mess that we're in yesterday. He's talking about a corrupt, sleazy group of politicians. What are you going to do?
Actually, I think Lindsay Hoyle, the Speaker, made an interesting intervention, which is that the Committee on Standards is looking at the process, the system, and I think there should be cross-party support to get, in a depoliticised way, to get the system that we have in place robust, clear accountability, clear transparency, but also fair in the sense that there's a proper right of appeal that anyone in any other working professional life, whether you as a journalist, a doctor, a nurse, a teacher, would expect. And I think that's the way you make a sustainable system. We're very committed to that. It needs cross-party support. I think that's the point the Speaker was making.
Yeah, you also conflated the two issues because you thought you were going to get away with that.
I don't think we thought we'd get away from it, but I do accept, Kay, just plainly, it was a mistake to conflate two issues. One, the case of that individual MP, Owen Paterson, who now, of course, has resigned, and secondly, the wider system for making sure you've got due process. It's a mistake. I regret it. We as a government regret it.
Should he be made a peer in the fullness of time?
Look, there's no question. There hasn't been offered. There's absolutely no question of that being under consideration.
So you wouldn't support it?
Well, it's not something for me, but I can tell you it has not been offered, and there are no plans in relation to that.
Of course, the reason I brought that up, of course, is because 15 out of the last 16 treasurers for the Conservative Party have each donated at least £3 million. I'm not saying that as a direct result they've got a seat in the House of Lords, but nevertheless that is the case. The SNP want the Metropolitan Police to look at it, and we've been speaking to Labour this morning, and they support that.
They'll make their political points in the way that they want to. But look, what I would say is, first of all, there are very clear rules for donations to political parties. No one's suggesting any wrongdoing in relation to that in this regard. In relation to becoming appointed to the House of Lords, there's also very clear rules. I would just say that, of course, people who are entrepreneurs but also engaged in public service, whether that's charities, whether that's supporting political parties, do a public service. And certainly we benefit when the Conservative Party, as a treasurer, people who've got that kind of experience.
Cash for peerages, though, is illegal.
Well, and there's absolutely no question that we haven't followed all of the rules in relation to that, and no one is suggesting, and I don't think you were, that we've done anything illegal.
No, but the SNP says that they want the Metropolitan Police to look at it. Is it right that the police should look at it if a political party, two political parties, think they should?
OK, of course, the independence of the police is something that we all ought to respect. They shouldn't take instruction from any political party, and they don't. And there is no criminal investigation, there is no police investigation, and frankly, there isn't a credible suggestion of any wrongdoing in relation to this.
So it's wasting police time?
Well, that's something I think you could meaningfully put to the SNP and
what do you think?
The others. Look, I understand the politics of this. What I'm saying is that the integrity and the rules have been, both in relation to House of Lords appointments and donations, have been very strictly followed. There are very clear rules, and we follow them very carefully. OK,
let's go back to what was happening in the House of Commons yesterday. Why was the PM not there?
He was at a hospital in the North East. I think as we come through the pandemic...
He was very Hemingway-esque. He couldn't run any further away, could he?
Well, that was I think, in fairness, that was a meeting, a visit that was a pre-existing commitment. But I think people would understand that as we come back from the pandemic, not just dealing with the booster vaccine programme, which is going great guns, but we want to keep pushing forward, but also the backlog in the NHS that we're funding to the tune of billions, that's where his focus was. But we also had the senior member of the government in Cabinet, the Cabinet Office Minister, Steve Barclay, who deals with this issue, responding at the House at the dispatch box. That's right too.
But he could have, there was time after he got back into London. He could have gone to the chamber to at least show his face, and that would have been the right thing to do, according to some backbench Conservative MPs. They want the captain on the pitch.
Well, it's right to, I think, draw a team analogy, which is why you had Steve Barclay, who's the responsible minister, looking at that, dealing with that. The Prime Minister has already made a statement on it. But look, and he was dealing with, he was on a visit to the North East in a hospital. And I think, given the situation that we've had with the pandemic, it's absolutely the right priority.
Why didn't he have his mask on when he was in a clinical setting?
Well, he followed all the advice and all the guidance that he got at all times, and I think that's the right thing for all of us to do.
Yeah, but he should have had a mask on. He's a busy man. It's a very challenging job. Do you think he just forgot?
I think, like many of us, we take the advice and the guidance that we've got in different settings, and that's the right thing for us to do as politicians, is the right thing for the public to do.
But he did say in clinical settings you should wear a mask. That's what he said previously, and everybody around him was wearing a mask. What impression is that for people who are looking to their politicians to guide them?
Well, look, all I can say is when I go into a setting, just like the Prime Minister, I take the guidance that I'm given, particularly if you're on an official visit, and we follow that very carefully. And I think anyone visiting would do that for whatever the purpose of their visit was.
Would you wear a mask if you went into a hospital?
I follow all the guidance very carefully. And when I go, I was up visiting a prison in Glenparva last week. When I go to the courts, I follow the advice, the guidance that we're given very carefully.
It was a stupid thing for him to do.
It
was, though. I mean, seriously, he's in a hospital, he's surrounded by medics. They've all got flipping masks on, and the Prime Minister doesn't put one on. He tucks his tie and he rolls his sleeves up. All he had to do was put a mask on. Well, and then we wouldn't have been talking about it now.
Well, I'm sure you'd have found something else to pick up on.
I would have, but it wouldn't have been this.
OK, well, look, he followed the guidance that was given to him, and I think that's the right thing to do.
OK, so as far as the SNP is concerned, we feel that they are potentially doing this in order to make a political point. You would be very comfortable, though, if the Metropolitan Police felt that it was appropriate to at least look into the situation, like they did with Labour, with when the then Prime Minister Tony Blair was involved.
Well, look, I'm saying I don't think it's right for us to tell the police what to do. The police are independent. That operational independence is crucially important. And I think, frankly, the SNP are just trying to rake muck.
Why do you say that?
Well, it's clearly the job in any society for the police, independently of political persuasion, influence or anything like that, to conduct their job. And it's for them to decide those matters, whether to launch an investigation, whether charges are brought with the CPS in relation to any criminal case. And they haven't done it to date, and I think the SNP calling for it is clearly political.
But a complaint has to be made in order for the police to get involved, doesn't it?
No, the police can get involved at their own initiative in relation to any crime or criminal offence. They obviously need to have some investigative lead, but they don't need a political party, let alone the SNP or frankly, any other party telling them or directing them or steering them with what to do. They don't need that to look at a case.
Lots of cases are backlogged. I know that you spoke to Tamara about it yesterday, and many thousands of cases need to be sorted out. And you didn't deny that it could take 8 or 9 years to get back on track.
Well, no, look, what I said is, first of all, 95% of criminal cases go through the magistrates' court. The backlog there is already coming down. Great tribute to them and all the staff working there. For the 5% of cases that go through the Crown Court, which because of social distancing meant jury trials couldn't function in the usual way, I think people would understand that. We've had a backlog. It's been rising. It's now stabilised, and we're throwing everything in to getting it down. I'm confident that within 6 to 12 months, we'll start getting that backlog down with the super courts that we're putting in place to take multiple defendants, with the Nightingale courts, with the extra money I secured with the Chancellor at the spending review, with the virtual technology, with removing the limit on sitting days. And we realise it's important. It's not a technical issue. It's particularly important for any victims who have their cases pending and who want to see justice done. That's where all of our efforts are going.
And where are we as far as educating prisoners are concerned going forward?
I think it's a massive issue. The three big things for me, on top of building the places so that dangerous offenders go into prison and increasing the sentencing, which we're doing with our police crime sentencing and courts bill, which Labour and the SNP opposed. It's important that when people are in prison, where they get the drug rehabilitation, they get the skills, and they can get some training and, if possible, get employment. I was just up at Glenparva in Leicestershire, one of the state-of-the-art prisons that we're building. One of the things we're doing is bringing in in-cell technology. So with simple things like numeracy and literacy, offenders are not just sitting there in their bunk, feet up, but actually focusing on getting themselves the skills they need. They can also then do their theory bit of their driving licence. These are the kinds of things that give them a chance to go straight, which is what cuts reoffending and protects the public.
There could all be HGV drivers. Who knows by the time they come out of prison? You know, you guys are doing amazing work in all sorts of areas. I'm sure that my viewers would agree with that. But they still keep coming back to this sleaze nonsense. You have to accept that you've got a credibility issue as a government at the moment. How are you going to fix it?
Look, the answer is to have clear rules, properly enforced, and a sustainable system. I've been very clear with you about the handling and the conflation of the case with the due process. It was a mistake. We regret it. I think people want to see us getting on with the job. And I do think we need a sustainable system for complaints, firm but fair, and that's what the public expect. I think they also want to see us getting on with the job, as you said, making sure our prisons work, the Prime Minister out, making sure we're at the hospital in the North East, making sure we're dealing with the pandemic. We want to be dealing with that job and not distracted by these issues. And, of course, you need a proper system in place to make sure we can do that. And
a final thought on the pandemic before I let you go. Double jabs for those who are on the front line at the NHS, or they lose their job?
Look, the Health Secretary will announce more in relation to that.
What do you think?
I think it's critically important in those vulnerable settings, care homes and the NHS, that particularly as we go through the winter months, that the vulnerable people there are properly protected. And I think we need to get, by any means necessary, the level of jabs up. We've done well on the double jabs. We've got, and the boosters, we've got 10 million across the country. I think we made great strides in care homes and in the NHS setting. The overwhelming number of of people, proportion of people in those settings are now jabbed. But I think it's critically important, but for the welfare, the protection of the lives of those people that are under their care.
So if you're not double jabbed, then you really need to not be working with the most vulnerable.
Well, I think first and foremost at this stage, and the Health Secretary will make any further announcements, we're just encouraging everyone to come forward. And actually that process of encouragement has yielded great dividends. But I think people will understand, particularly in those most vulnerable settings, it is crucially important, with everything we learned from the peak of the crisis, how important it is for people to be insulated and protected from the virus.
Sounds like a yes.
Well, as you're tempting me to preempt any announcements in due course, I'll leave that to the Health Secretary. But I think we have made great progress, and the truth is, going into these colder months, because of the vaccine rollout, because of the measures we've taken, we're in a much more resilient place to weather these difficult months and come through this. And with the economy bounding back, with us getting the world together at COP26, I think you get the feeling that Britain is bouncing back stronger than before.
OK. Have you had your booster yet?
Not yet, but I'll come.
Because you're not old enough, I know.
I'll get it as soon
I
as
had mine a month ago. Yeah, OK. We'll leave it there then. Deputy Prime Minister, thanks so much indeed for joining us. Thanks a lot.